a word that means something to do with pasta or something like, I don't know, what is the flat bread that you eat, pita bread, nothing like that, you know. Paterfamilias is a word that describes, it's actually two words, it describes the leader of the family. Remember that last week we said that paterfamilias was the head of the household. Pater means father, in Greek pater, father. It's a Latin word, it's used in Roman culture. And we get words like paternity from it. If you've ever been part of a paternity, or paternal comes from that, pater. The word pattern, if you ever use the word pattern, maybe you didn't realize it's connected with being fatherly, because that's where the roots of the word come from. Perhaps at some point in your life, you heard the word or the little phrase paternoster. If you've ever heard that word, you know what I'm talking about. But it just simply means our Father, and paternoster. So this series is about fathers, but more than that, it's about families. That's really what it's all about. Even the great football coach from Penn State, Joe Paterno, his name has to do something with being connected with being fatherly. And I wonder if his players thought that when he had him out at 5 a.m. running wind sprints. Thank you for being such a good father, coach. But that word, pater, is about the head of the household. The paterfamilias was one person. That's not a plural word. It's one person. Comes to us from a different language, but it means that person who's the head of the household, the one who is the head of making decisions. Today's message is titled, "We Put the Fun in Dysfunction." And everybody said amen. We're going to look at family relationships in the book of Genesis. What I want to do this morning is bring out the earliest generations from Father Abraham on down, about the way God intercepts our human pain. How many of you are glad that God intercepts our human pain? The premier Jewish family, I mean the ones that the entire nation of Israel is based on, their entire family structure set the pace for what families would be like, and they are really on full display in the book of Genesis. This family, they're very vulnerable. You're going to see some of that in the text this morning. Sometimes they are so dysfunctional that it borders on comedic. I mean, some of the stuff that happens in the book of Genesis, you just think, oh my goodness, wow, this family, this poor family. But their struggles become the template of struggle that all people can relate to one way or another. So this morning we're taking a close look at the family in the book of Genesis, all the way from Abraham to Joseph. 4 generations. We're going to talk specifically a lot about the third generation. A lot more time is spent in Scripture talking about that third generation and their interaction. And but these 4 families really are what make up most of Genesis. These 4 generations of one family. Now, don't be intimidated by our text this morning. I need to just tell you up front. The sermon covers Genesis chapters 12 through 50. Now, don't get afraid, all right? We're not going to read the entire thing. And if you're glad about this, say, oh, thank goodness. But there's a reason for chapters 12 through 50. You see, John Goldingay says that the first 11 chapters of Genesis, we can think of those as the Old Testament of the Old Testament. I mean, it truly was totally different territory, right? I mean, you've got Adam and Eve and sin entering into the world, and all the way down to the point where God destroys the world with a flood, right? And starts all over again with one man, Noah, and his family, and from there they populate the planet. At chapter 11, you have the entrance of languages into the world when they're trying to build the Tower of Babel. And so Genesis chapters 1 through 11, I think that's a good way to think about it. That's the Old Testament of the Old Testament. But chapters 12 through 50 is really the beginning of human history as we know it here in our lifetimes. Generations after generations, and they feed off of the ones ahead of them. They learn some of the good things that the family did in front of them. They also learn some of the bad things that the family did in front of them. So we're looking at 4 generations, and while we do that, I hope that you kind of keep in mind a particular phrase from the Bible that speaks of families, and it talks about our existence. It uses this kind of language. It says, to the 3rd or 4th generation. That phrase is really meant to capture what one person experiences in an entire lifetime. Typically 4 generations, now they're saying 5, but people are living longer. But for the most part, you come as a baby and you experience a dad, a mom, a grandpa, a grandma, maybe a great-grandmother, great-grandfather. But then as you progress along, isn't it interesting? I'm in this stage of life where, I keep being treadmilled, conveyored up, one more ratchet up the line. And I realize, boy, unless I get super healthy, I have less years in front of me than I do behind me. I mean, you start thinking these kinds of things. You start reading the obituaries in the paper. You start counting up and going, oh, I'm not so bad because, only 2 out of 10 are younger than me. You start thinking about these things. So we're going to look at 4 generations. Generation 1, Abraham and Sarah. Generation 1, Abraham and Sarah. The Bible introduces us to this guy whose name is Abraham. First, we meet him as Abram, but then it gets changed. His name gets changed to Abraham. He marries a lady named Sarah, right? How many of you have heard of Abraham and Sarah before? Okay. Father Abraham had many sons, the patriarch, the leader of what would become the nation of Israel. Same thing with Sarah. At first we meet her as Sarai, and then God gives her a name change too. Her new name is Sarah. And God tells Abraham, go from your kindred and your country and your father's house to the land I will show you. That's how Genesis chapter 12 begins. It starts with that very scripture. It's sort of going, not knowing. Okay, Abraham, this is God speaking. Yes, Lord, I hear. What do you want? I want you to go, leave this land, and go where I'm going to show you. How many of you have ever gone not knowing exactly what God had in store, but you're just simply stepping out in faith and following the Lord? Well, Abraham does this. So from the start, we have this mysterious deception that hovers like an omen owl over the family tree. Abram tells Pharaoh that his wife Sarai is his sister. It's only later in the narrative that we find out that she actually is his stepsister, the daughter of his father, but not the same mother. V.H. Matthews says about their union that Abraham and Sarah, it was marked by barrenness for a long stretch because they knew they were living in sin. They were living a lie. Abram's motives are clear from the very first episode. Look at this. It's chapter 12, verse 13. That it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared on your account. This is Abraham talking to his wife Sarah about the fact that they've been deceiving the king. And he says, we need to do this so that it goes well with me because of you. Some translators say it should actually read that it goes well for you, not because of you. So reading it that way, it would be sort of like Abraham is convincing Sarah that, hey, listen, two things. If you go along with this, there's a couple of great outcomes. One, we're going to get wealthy, you and I. Two, I get to live. I can understand what Abraham is going through. And so they have this secret and they bury it. Not having children becomes a sore spot for this couple. Their marriage is awesome in every other way, except they're just not able to have children. And by the way, I need to say this up front. Let me just state it. Infertility is not a curse from God. I do not feel that. I don't believe that, and I want you to know that. However, I do want you to know that in this particular instance, there is a connection in which every other way they were blessed. I mean, Sarah is attractive. She's an attractive woman, even well past menopause. They go into this thing together. They deceive town leaders. They even decide they're going to try to deceive angels when they visit them. I wouldn't suggest trying to do that. That doesn't usually go well. And this tension of having no children intercepts all of the interaction with the outside world. And it seems to be a test of faith for this particular couple, a test from God. There's so much irony. I hope that you catch this. There's a lot of irony in the way they interact with King Abimelech. And it goes like this. Abraham and Sarah, they're not able to produce any children on their own. The judgment of God against the city, watch what happens. Abimelech takes Sarah because he says, well, she's just your sister. I want her in my court. That's the king saying, I want you to be one of my harem. And so he brings in Abraham's sister. But he realizes that she's not his sister. He sees Abraham caressing her, and he puts two and two together. He's no idiot. He's like, oh, you lied to me. But the amazing thing is about this is that there was a sense in which God had judged them as a couple, but then because Abimelech brought her into his surroundings, the entire city came under that judgment. This was a major, major deal. The king was king so long as he could keep producing male babies. To keep the name. The family name keeps going. But now all of a sudden the fountain dries up. No more babies. None are getting pregnant. None are being born. And Abimelech is worried what's going on. And he realizes it's because of Sarah. She's not your sister. She's your wife. Just a little side note. A little side note here that I think is important for all of us to pick up on. It is entirely possible that as an individual, when you lust for another individual, not only are you lusting for their physical body, but hear me, you very well may be lusting for the entirety of who they are as a package deal. In other words, we are so intricately designed holistically by God. Spirit, body, soul, mind. It's a package deal. And so here was Abimelech lusting after Sarah, and he brings her into his life, and suddenly he also receives all of the package deal, and the entire city is now hurting. No babies being born. So, but the problem, though, with Abraham and Sarah, it was not a problem that was only outside. It wasn't just affecting the city, but this thing had fingers, and it was reaching into their family line. Sarah had a handmaid named Hagar, who Sarah gives to her husband Abraham, and they have a child together. You remember the story, Ishmael. How many of you remember that story? Ishmael becomes the father of what we now know as the Muslim people. It's traced all the way back to Ishmael. And I won't go into all of the entire story, but it's just amazing when we as humans try to manipulate situations and try to help God out. boy, we mess things up. We must trust Him that in His timing, He will fulfill His promises. So you know that story. Sarah, she resents Hagar and her son, who's named Ishmael. And even though it was Sarah's idea, Sarah lashes out at her husband. And notice what she says. May the wrong done to me be on you. She's saying this to Abraham. Abraham isn't going to have any of it. He puts it right back on her. Your slave girl, right, is in your power to do with her as you please. You see how they're doing the same thing that Adam and Eve did? It wasn't me, it was him. No, it wasn't me, it was her. And they're both pointing fingers. It was a mess. But when Abraham and Sarah received the news of their son Isaac, both of them laughed. Both of them, they literally laughed. When Abraham gets news that Isaac is going to be born, he laughs about it. And then Sarah tries to hide her laughter. I didn't laugh. The angels of God, possibly an appearance of the Lord Himself. Yes, you did laugh. I mean, you can say whatever you want. I wasn't laughing. Oh, yes, you were. And when we stand before God someday, we can say anything we want to any number of people. Well, I didn't do this, I didn't. And God's going to just simply say it like it is. No, you did do this. I mean, it's very clear, it's very plain to Him. But Isaac, this is what's amazing. Isaac's name, Yitzchak, it means he laughs. Abraham hears news about his son going to be born and he just laughs. Sarah hears about it, she just laughs. And by the way, everybody's laughing. Who ever heard of a 99-year-old man and a 90-year-old lady having a baby together? I mean, everybody ought to be laughing, right? So his name, they call him, he laughs, they call him Yitzchak. And, but the thing about it is that Isaac is really the one, he is named for laughter, but God gets the last laugh, doesn't He? So now, this brings us to generation number 2, Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac and Rebekah. So first generation, we had Father Abraham and his wife Sarah. And now we've moved down a generation to Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac loved Rebekah the moment he laid eyes on her. Significant things happened between Isaac and Rebekah. The Bible says Isaac was comforted after his mother's death by Rebekah. This was just his answer to prayer. I know every husband is with me. You've told your wife this week, honey, you're an answer to prayer. If you haven't said that recently, say it today. You're an answer to prayer. And they have twins together. Esau and Jacob, right? Esau and Jacob, two nations inside Rebekah's womb. That's what the scripture says. 2 nations, 2 people groups, 2 ethnicities in your womb. And Esau becomes the nation of Edom, and Jacob becomes a nation too. Which nation does Jacob become? Israel. His name gets changed to Israel. It means he wrestles with God. He's the one who pinned some kind of being to the ground and said, I won't let go unless you bless me. So desperate. But so Esau and Jacob are born. Esau is named Esau because that's the color red. He's hairy. He's got red hair all over him. He's a hairy guy. He loves to hunt. Loved to eat red stew, too. Esau. In fact, Edom, the nation he becomes, kind of has a little hint of that in it. He's red. Jacob, what does Jacob mean? Jacob means heel grabber. So, when he's born, he's holding onto the heel of his twin brother. And they say, look at that, you little heel grabber. Oh, that's a good name. Let's call him heel grabber. It was a name that meant sort of like swindler, sort of like horse thief. Now, how would you like to be named horse thief? Hey, horse thief, your turn to take the trash out, Can't you just hear it? And you might think, well, who would name their child that? Why would they do that? Well, people do that stuff all the time. You know, I've met people named pagan, heathen. I met one named evil. Those kinds of names, you know, happen in our culture. It is no coincidence that Rebecca, now follow this, Rebecca chooses the marriage issue as the leverage for her son Jacob's escape. You follow what I'm saying? Here's what she does. Genesis 27:46. I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. Oh, Isaac, I just can't go on. He can't stay here with these Hittite women. And if Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Isn't that right? And she knew her request would not be denied by Isaac. Why? Because the same request 40 years earlier became the linchpin for her own marriage with Isaac. Same thing happened. We can almost hear Father Abraham's dying wish when the aging Isaac, he hears the plea of his wife, oh, I can't stand these Hittite women. Please send them back to get a wife from our people. Rebekah's request must have jolted the memory of Isaac so that all of a sudden he remembered way back his father Abraham on his deathbed made sure his servant would go and get a wife for Isaac. Isaac has a flood of memories. And the emphatic tone is unmistakable. The servant was to go and secure among the family of his own home country and not from Canaan. And the death wish was, see to it that you do not take my son back there. That's what Abraham had said. Now Rebekah is saying the same thing to her husband, Isaac. The miraculous provision of Rebekah as his wife was just as important in Isaac's life as probably the other singular, huge, significant event. The two rivaled each other. One was when he met his wife Rebekah for the first time, when he sees that caravan coming. And his heart loved her and he was comforted after his mother's death. But the other significant event was when he's up on the mountaintop and his daddy raises a knife over him and he's about to sacrifice his own son. But little Isaac, or young man he may have been, laying on the altar, hears the voice of the angel, Abraham, Abraham, do not kill your son. Now I know that you were willing to give your son, your only son, as a sacrifice. And it meant that Isaac got to get untangled and rescued off of that altar. It was a miraculous, miraculous event. Now, 40 years have passed. Now the tables are turned. Now his son, Abraham's son, Isaac's son, now Jacob is the one who's 40 years old, and Jacob is the one who's the blessed child. Interesting parallels between the generations, and you have to add Esau into the mix. Esau is a classic case of missed it by that much. I mean, he was so close. He had the same command from his father, go out and kill some wild game and bring me the meal that I like. And apparently he had success bow hunting, and he comes back in with a meal and he brings it to his father. He says, here, Father, bless me now with my deathbed blessing. But Isaac says, whoa, 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 who was that who just left? I gave the blessing to them. What are you talking about? It's me, Dad, it's Esau. No, son, your brother Jacob, he came in and he stole your blessing just before you came in. And Esau says, wasn't he named correctly? That horse swindler, that thief. that heel grabber. Not only has he stolen my birth blessing, but now he has stolen my deathbed blessing. Now, I hope I'm not crushing some of your images of these godly people in the Bible. But the thing that here's the deal. If I were going to write a book and try to tell everybody, here's what God's family should look like, I'd leave out all the bad stuff. I'd really polish it up, try to make it pretty and palatable. I'd want to make sure it sounded good. But God doesn't do that. God just says, man, here's this family, warts and all, but I love them. I'm going to pour out my love on them. I'm going to redeem them. And so it brings us to generation 3, and I'm calling it Jacob and Rachel. Really, we could call it Jacob and Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, but we won't do that. The antics of Jacob and his wives and concubines, it borders on the comedic. It is terse with dysfunction. You remember the story. Leah is unloved, or at least she's less loved. And remember that their daddy tricked the swindler. He tricked Jacob into having 2 wives, not just one. And quite a story there. But both of them, they both, in time, they incorporate their handmaids into the tradition of Grandma Rebecca. Just the same way Grandma Rebecca did. Now these 2 little granddaughters, they're going to do the same thing. Leah gives us a telescope into this family pain. She plays second fiddle, and she's continually struggling to come out from under the oppression of her baby sister, who is loved more than she is loved. She names her children for the way she's been wrestling. Reuben, to signify that God sees. Simeon implies that God hears. Levi indicates her desire to be attached to her husband. And with the 4th one, she intentionally turns the attention to God. Judah is synonymous with praise. And so you have this amazing thing that's going on. She's having babies, but Rachel's not having babies. And the pain of having no children, it weighs upon Rachel until it erupts in this otherwise storied romance, just like great-grandpa, or just like Grandpa Abraham and Sarah. Same thing with Jacob and Rachel. Both healthy, attractive, loved one another, had a lot to look forward to. But the one thing that Rachel wanted so much was to have a child, but she was not able to have a child. And finally, her pain exploded towards her husband. And look at what she says, "Give me children or I'll die." Can you just feel the pain? She's looking at the family tree. It's lopsided. Leah's having all these children. I'm not having children. I've got to do something. And Jacob resists the temptation to say the obvious, right? Jacob does not say, "Oh, Rachel, the problem is not with me." He doesn't say that. I mean, obviously, I'm having children. But there's this problem. He directs the argument to God. He points the argument to God, God's will. And so, Bilhah. Now you have another one coming into the picture. Bilhah is given to Jacob. Who is Bilhah? Well, she is the servant maid of Rachel. Rachel does just like her grandparents did. Hey, I remember one time when Sarah said, "I can't have a baby." And she got Hagar to have a baby for her. And that's where Ishmael came from. And so she does the same thing. I can't trust God for it. I can't wait. Jacob, here, take a Bilhah and have a child with her. And so she calls the 2 sons Dan, judged. It means judgment. It means vindicated. It means take that, Leah. And Naphtali, I win. I win. Now, they're good names. There's nothing wrong with these names. These are awesome names. And a lot of us choose to name children after these names, and they have become symbolic with the strength that each tribe represents. But I'm telling you, when they began, it began in a lot of dysfunction and a lot of pain. And so these names. Now, Leah would not be outdone though. Oh, no, no, no. Leah says, oh, no, you didn't. And she says, hey, Jacob, take my servant Zilpah. Who's Zilpah? Well, we meet a lady named Zilpah. Zilpah is Leah's handmaid servant. Jacob, I can't have children anymore. Be with Zilpah. So now you've got Jacob with 4 wives. I do not believe in that, but I want to just tell you, aside from not believing it, I don't know how anybody could ever, I mean, 1 wife is plenty for any one man. And that's the way God designed it to be. Now, here's what happens. She gives her servant Zilpah, and she gets 2 more sons on her side of the scorecard. Gad. It means good fortune. Asher. I was so happy. And maybe she was happy, but here's what I kind of feel like. Hey, Leah, how are you doing? Oh, I'm happy. I'm so happy. If we could really look at what's going on deep inside. And so when tensions are heightened, the smallest little things can become larger than life. And so the story reaches an apex. Get this, this is just supposed to be some dumb throwaway comment, but it comes a part of the narrative of this family's story. It reaches the climax when one day one of the kids is out in the fields and he's harvesting vegetables, and he comes across a mandrake plant, and he brings it to his mom, and Rachel's holding the mandrake, and I got that backwards. Leah's got the mandrake, and here's what she says. Look at this. Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? What was happening? So the son brings mandrakes back to the village. Leah is holding them, and Rachel's saying, could I have those mandrakes? And mandrakes were thought to have special properties in the ancient culture. They were thought to be properties for fertility. They were used in the ancient world as aphrodisiacs. And Leah is just dripping with sarcasm. She says, wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? And now you want the mandrakes too? But sometimes words are greasy, and once they get out, you can't take them. You can't. There's many times I wish I could just put them back in there, but you can't. It's out there. And she stated how she felt. And so Leah remarks with just uncharacteristic boldness when, now you know what? Sometimes this happens with preachers. I got the story all wrong. Rachel was the one with the mandrakes. Leah was asking Rachel for the mandrakes. So Rachel just bursts out. And so here Leah comes with the mandrakes that she has purchased. And she comes to Jacob and she says, Jacob, I have purchased you for tonight. Tonight you have to sleep with me because I've given the mandrakes away. And Leah, and by the way, just, if I had been Jacob, we would have had some loud fellowship about that. What do you mean you purchased me? You own me? I mean, he's a, you know, there's a tug of war in this family, and Jacob is the rope. He's right in the middle of all of this. But from that, Leah receives 2 more children. There's Issachar, it means reward, and Zebulun, it means gift. And just to show how important it was to produce male babies, and that's what it was all about, because that keeps the family name going, you have this casual mention of Dinah's birth. Who's Dinah? She's the sister. Probably only because she becomes important to the storyline later on, they mention her. Some people even believe there may have been other daughters, but they were not accorded the right to be mentioned. Dinah becomes part of the story in the next generation, and it's very important. So that's why she's mentioned here. But her birth announcement is way less than glamorous. It just simply says, sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. And it's a sad indictment on the way females were treated in that time period. But I want you to notice something. All of these names, how important they are. You've got the name Dinah, you've got Leah, you've got Bilhah, you've got Zipporah, even at the top, Sarah, Rebecca. Each one of those names is a variant for an abbreviated name for Yahweh. When, just like Elijah, Jeremiah, when you see a Hebrew name with that sound at the end, it's a way of attaching their name to God. And I think it's beautiful that in all of this dysfunction of this family, at least their names connect them, each one in a specific way with God. And Rachel, her name connects her with the name for Elohim, the name of Almighty God. And so here's a godly family. They love the Lord, but they've got a lot of stuff going on in their lives. And Rachel is finally remembered by the Lord. He opens her womb. She conceives a son and names him Joseph. Joseph means, my disgrace has been removed. But it speaks for the entire family's lust for more, because it also has this connotation, may the Lord add to me another son. And I think Rachel's quest is humanity's quest. Always just one more. Just give me one more. One time a very wealthy man was asked, how will you know when you have enough money? And he responded, I'm not sure, but just a little bit more. There's something about humanity that we want a little more. We want a little more. Something more. Something is missing. How much is enough? Just a little more. And then sadly, Rachel dies giving birth to Benjamin. And she wanted to name him son of my pain. But Jacob says no. Jacob, the paterfamilias, says, no, we will not name him son of my pain. We will name him son of my strength, son of my right hand. And there you have all 12 of the patriarchs. Now, generation 4, just quickly as we're getting ready to close. The 4th generation is the brothers. And the 4th generation does not focus on marriage nearly as much as the previous ones, but it does speak expressly about their family relations. We're told that Joseph married Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, but the emphasis is not on their relationship, rather Joseph's tumultuous rivalries that keep finding expression in God's deliverance. All of this has worn Jacob to a frazzle. It has passed from one generation to the next. The pain that Jacob carried, the pain that his wives carried, is now passed to his sons. They jockey for position, they jockey for favor. When Joseph emerges as the clear front runner, they sold him into slavery and pretended that he had been killed by a wild animal. Joseph endured years of bitter pain because of their actions, yet God promoted him in spite of them, and in the end, he responds so characteristically, this man of God, even though you intended to harm me, God intended it for good. It's one of the hallmark promises to all of us, and it's a hallmark promise to Joseph and to all of his family line. God is using it for good. All that was bad about the previous generations is brought to bear upon this generation, and in fact it's even accelerated. So, whereas Laban, the wicked father-in-law of Jacob, had been deceptive in the way that he tricked Jacob, he changed his wages 7 times. He kept tricking him. He tricked him into marrying both of his daughters instead of one. And Abraham and Jacob had such an experience with the same kinds of things. Judah, think about Judah. Judah deceives his daughter-in-law Tamar about his intentions, only to have the tables turned on him. Tamar outwits her father-in-law, dresses as a prostitute. Judah and Tamar have a child together. He doesn't even realize he's been with his own daughter-in-law. Abraham and Isaac had both been deceptive about the true nature of their relationships with their wives. And Abraham and Jacob had fathered children through their servant girls. Reuben deceptively has sexual relations with his father's concubine. Whereas Jacob knew tension in the relationship with his brother Esau, now it's heightened more than ever. And you've got the strain of the sons dealing with one another. Jacob deceived his father Isaac. His sons deceived an entire community with their sister Dinah. And it brought great fear and grief to Father Jacob. All of this is going on in that generation. The irony of it all comes to roost when finally Joseph is recognized for who he is in Egypt. He's been sold into slavery, but God would use it for good. And now Joseph is in a position to do good to all of his brothers. And he blesses them, and this carries them through the famine. But he can't resist to deceive them a little bit. He has to, because it's just part of this is the way our family does. And so we've been tricking and deceiving one another for 4 generations. So he pretends to be somebody else who doesn't understand the language. He makes them take 2 very expensive trips back and forth from Egypt and Israel. But he does pay them back. It's just that he can't resist to do a little bit of tricking of his own. But the irony is, and this is what I want you to know, through all of this, through all of the pain, they are left to experience that, you know what? God remained faithful. Even though our family has had a lot of pain, yet God remains faithful. Each week, I'm closing with what I call the family crest. And it's that insignia that says something about who we are as the family of God. And that's it today. Here's our family crest. God is faithful. The story unfolding from these families, it shows us how God intervenes and how He steps into earth and God interacts with all of our families. The escapades of the premier Jewish family, they speak about all of the dysfunction of God's chosen people. It sort of serves as like an inset on a map when you see a large city, but then there's a little inset that shows you a particular area. That's what we get to do with the premier Jewish family. We get to open it up and look at their family and go, oh my goodness, some of that isn't pretty. But isn't God faithful? That's the whole point. The devil meant it for good, but God has taken it and He means it for good, not for evil. And so God is always the one who is reaching out to the underdogs to lift them up and make them successful. You may have been told that the perfect family looks like this. Ward and June, and Wally and the beaver. And sometimes in our thinking, we picture Leave It to Beaver and the Cleaver family. But the truth is, that's a misnomer. It doesn't exist. Even the very best of situations for family have pain. It's part of the human experience. Edgar, who is a new convert, and he's one of Zach's disciples out at the prison, made the comment to Zach recently, "So, have your mother and father ever had a disagreement?" And Zach laughed and said, "Like, how many times today?" Edgar's kind of funny. He comes from a Catholic background. He's very reverential towards me. I think it's like kind of that priest thing or something. One time at the vending machine, he walked up and he just went like this. I said, "Oh, no, please don't do that. If you knew me, if you knew our family, none of us is perfect. We strive to be the best we can be. But God remains faithful." And so you've got this big picture going on that God is intercepting all of the pain and using it for His glory and for His honor. Now, where we're going from here, next week we get into some New Testament teaching about what the Lord expects from our families. And He's asking us to raise the bar as fathers, as husbands, as moms, as wives, as children, as parents. He's asking us to raise the bar. I'm just praying that God will bless our families with His love. I know that you know this, but just in the same way as God was faithful to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their offspring, God is faithful to us. There's not a one of us in the room that could stand unless it were for the grace of God, but He is so faithful. As we close this morning, I asked Darren if he would play that song that we were singing earlier, "Oh Come to the Altar." And as that song is playing, I want to just be here. If you have any prayer needs, I would love to pray with you. If you have a need for prayer for healing, I'd count it a great honor to pray with you. If you want to just find a place to pray and just ask God to make your family, our families, better, stronger, everything that He wants us to be, I would love for that to happen. I want to invite you, would you stand right now? And many of you, would you come and just make your way to the front? If you need prayer, again, I'm here. I want to pray with you. And I would really, that'd be the greatest honor of my day to pray with you. But I really, truly do encourage you, spend some moments with the Lord before you leave this place today. Can we all do that? The Lord bless you.